A new beginning. The leaders of Turkey and the UAE are set to hold their first meeting in nearly a decade. Will trade and economic cooperation be the opening to put aside years of tensions? I'll break it all down here on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. The last time the leaders of Turkey and the UAE met face-to-face, the world was a very different place. Many of the conflicts that raged over the past decade were in their early stages. Regional tensions were far from the high points we saw just last year. And there wasn't a global pandemic. But now, ahead of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's meeting with the UAE's de facto leader, a once tense relationship could be headed in a more positive direction. Hadia Al-Alawi explains.
Hope for a new era. The first meeting in nearly a decade between leaders of the UAE and Turkey could end years of a tense rivalry. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Crown Prince Mohamed bin Zayed Al Nahyan will discuss new partnerships and possible economic investments in the healthcare, defense, and energy sectors.
It seems now they are leaving behind all these differences and investing in more cooperative relations between the two countries.
The thawing of ties comes after a meeting between President Erdogan and the UAE's National Security Advisor Tahnoun bin Zayed Al Nahyan in Ankara in August. 2 weeks later, President Erdogan discussed ties between Turkey and the Gulf states in a phone call with the UAE's Crown Prince. Since then, several business deals have been signed. Abu Dhabi's Investment Authority or ADIA and state holding company ADQ, two of the Emirates' biggest wealth funds, are looking for business opportunities worth billions of dollars. ADQ alone is considering spending as much as $1 billion on healthcare and emerging financial technologies. The UAE and Turkey have been at odds over several issues across the Middle East and North Africa. The two had backed rival groups in Libya, but now both want parliamentary and presidential elections to go ahead. Turkey is also an ally of Qatar, which the UAE and other Gulf countries boycotted for 4 years over allegations it supported terrorism in the region, charges Doha denies. The embargo was finally lifted in January, something Ankara welcomed.
Turkey is supporting the unity, prosperity and the security of the Gulf region. And also we are ready to working closely with Oman and with all Gulf countries.
In recent months, Turkey has also improved relations with other Arab states, such as Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and Egypt. But it's the UAE's shift that offers a key opening for Turkey. Crown Prince Mohammed's foreign policy now includes a so-called economic diplomacy approach. It aims to better serve his country's interests and improve relations with regional neighbors through trade and investment. And given the volatility the global pandemic has brought, this opening could be what the UAE and Turkey need to forge better relations that will be a win for both sides. Hadia Al-Alawi, TRT World.
And for more on the meeting, I am joined now from Berlin by Cinzia Bianco, a Gulf Research Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. In San Francisco, we have Giorgio Cafiero. He is the founder and CEO of the geopolitical risk consulting firm, Gulf State Analytics. And in Istanbul is Murat Aslan, an associate professor at Sabahattin Zaim University. He is also a researcher at the policy and political think tank Setup. A warm welcome to you all. So, Cinzia, talk to us about the significance of this visit.
It is incredibly significant. We haven't seen anything like that for years. I would argue since the Arab uprisings of 2011, we have seen a progressive deterioration of relations between the UAE and Turkey, and linked to that, a progressive deterioration of relations between the two leaders. So that this meeting is now taking place, it is really the ultimate symbol of a new era and a new trend in the region.
So, Georgia, what do you make of the timing of this thaw in relations? Why now? I mean, have both sides been working to mend ties for some time?
There are definitely a couple of factors in play, but as Cinzia mentioned, it's very significant that this visit is happening. Let's keep in mind that it was only last year when Turkey's chief diplomat accused the UAE of being a major force for instability in the region, and not too long ago, officials in Abu Dhabi had very strong words when condemning actions taken by Turkey. But to get to your question, why is this going on now? As I said, we have a few factors in play. I think one big thing has to do with the COVID situation. Not only Turkey and the UAE, but many countries in the region, I think, are trying to find areas for more economic cooperation while also finding ways to conduct foreign policies that are a bit less expensive. And countries are moving away from some hawkish policies, moving more in the direction of diplomacy. There's also open questions about Washington's long-term commitment to the region, which is pressuring countries in the Middle East to try to improve ties within the neighborhood. And I also think that the UAE and Turkey have maybe seen some of the limits that come through some hard power. In Libya, I think sort of a balance has come into the equation that's forcing countries to start opening more dialogue with each other.
So, Murat, Turkey's foreign minister recently said that Turkey said that relations could be recalibrated with the United Arab Emirates, adding that it should take steps to alleviate Turkey's concerns. I mean, what are those concerns and what steps should be taken moving forward?
I think not the emotions, but agendas of the parties are important in such engagement. You know, Turkey and Arabic Emirates somehow confronted with each other, but indirectly in Libya first and Syria. And as you may know, Turkey had problems with Israel and Greek Cypriots, and they have connection with them, just encouraging the bad weather, the bad, climate against Turkey. So it was perceived in Turkey that United Arab Emirates is somehow playing to be more dominant in the region, starting from Gulf or Africa or the Eastern Mediterranean, and is in competition with Turkey. There are many reasons for this motivation, that's for sure. But, Turkey does not want any problem in the vicinity because we have elections in 2023. Well, economy is going not that much better as expected. Then I think zero problem policy of 2000s may be still in the agenda of the Turkish politicians. That may be another reason. But I'm not sure to what extent Arabic Emirates is approaching Turkey for, a full cooperation or in a goodwill manner. It's another problem.
That remains to be seen. So, Cinzia, Georgia just mentioned briefly the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, but what's the reason behind Abu Dhabi's recalibration its foreign policy? What's at stake for it?
I mean, there's three main factors. The first two are definitely the strong inputs that the UAE, such as any other regional players, has been receiving by the Biden administration in Washington, D.C. And those inputs clearly encourage them to de-escalate on regional conflicts. Also, as a way to sort of prepare for to a certain extent, post-American Middle East region. The second factor is, yes, the recalibration of a very expensive and quite ineffective, assertive regional policies that the UAE has been pursued, and now it is confronted with economic challenges such as those brought about by COVID-19, but also a necessity to reboot and reboost local growth vis-a-vis, for instance, international international events, such as the Expo 2020 taking place in Dubai as we speak. And the third factor is a perception that the trend towards de-escalation and a move away from competition on hard power towards soft power sort of competition and rivalry would happen with or without the UAE. And so the UAE does not want to miss that train, and they want to seize the opportunities that are presented by a regional environment where everyone wants to play softer and everybody wants to explore potential for compromises. Now, we don't know how long that sort of strategic pause and moment for opportunity and for compromise will last, but that's definitely happening right now.
So, Georgia, what impact did the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan have on regional ties? I mean, was it some sort of a wake-up call for regional countries in the Middle East that they need to work together to stabilize the region as well as Afghanistan?
I think the botched U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan earlier this year only added to concerns on the part of regional states that for many years have been questioning the wisdom of being so dependent on the United States. When you look at all the years, all the money that the U.S. put into Afghanistan, seeing the way in which the Americans left the country earlier this year, like I said, it added to these concerns. And this goes back way before the Biden administration. Under Trump, under Obama, and also during the George W. Bush presidency, there were a number of decisions that U.S. policymakers made which unsettled countries in the GCC. I look at the recent events in Afghanistan as just sort of being the latest chapter in that book.
So, Murat, how has the lifting of an embargo on Qatar helped Turkey to repair its ties with the UAE and other Gulf and Arab countries? I mean, where does Qatar stand in this respect, and has it played any facilitating role in this process?
Well, Turkish-Qatar relations are really strong, not to be challenged by any other actor in the Gulf region. On the other hand, just remember the pictures delivered to the media, MBS, MBZ, and, Tani was in the same picture. That means there's something going on right now in the Gulf region, in Arabian Peninsula. So, well, the visit of the Emirates to Turkey is not that much significant to challenge the overall course of relations of Turkey with Qatar, because I believe that they are in full, consultation with each other.
So, Cinzia, could you talk to us about the U.S.'s role in the region as, our countries realigning themselves? I mean, what kind of a role is the Biden administration playing at the moment in the region?
I mean, for the time being, the prevailing sentiment all around the region is one of actually confusion. There isn't that much clarity over the longer-term strategy of the Biden administration as to repositioning the U.S. role in the wider Middle East and North Africa region. One thing is clear, and that is clear in all regional capitals, is that the U.S., there's going to be less U.S. in the future of the region. They want to be less involved. They want to commit less resources to some extent. So how that is going to be articulated specifically, that remains to be seen, and that is the source of confusion. But I think, you've used a very interesting sentence, which is the realignment of regional actors. And I think that that's what we are going to be confronted with once we sort of exit this moment of confusion and maneuver and consolidation. We will emerge with a new regional order.
So just last year, the UAE normalized relations with Israel, Georgia, but today two of the key leaders who helped forge these agreements are gone, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. What impact their departure had on the region? I mean, did it play a role to speed up this realignment process?
I think that the UAE has many of its own perceived national interests in the Abraham Accords and its own formalized relationship with Israel. The fact that the leadership, which was in power in the U.S. and in Israel, last year when the Abraham Accords was signed is no longer there. It does not slow down this Emirati desire to move closer to Israel. And I think this normalization process is one that has been driven by a number of the factors that we are discussing, including major questions being asked by governments in the region about the U.S.'s long-term commitment to the region. Obviously, we're talking today about UAE-Turkey relations, but I do think that UAE's perceptions of Turkey as a threat were certainly one of the factors that drove the UAE to normalize with Israel last year.
Yeah, it seems there's some confusion, Murat, but what are the shared interests between the two countries? I mean, what are the overlapping priorities in light of changing dynamics in the region?
Well, I believe that shared interest is not to have another conflict, indirect conflict in the region, because Turkey is in a position right now to overstretch. Turkey is in Libya, Turkey is dealing with Syrian case in Eastern Mediterranean, well, in Azerbaijan, and dealing with other issues like Afghanistan. So another problem with UAE is something, overstretching all the capacities that will make Turkish politics, strategies for sure, a bit confusing. On the other hand, we must have been concerned about the UAE intention, because UAE is together with Israel in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea with great investment, and Turkey is in search of establishing another link with Israel through normalization together with Egypt. So UAE may contribute it because we know that they are in close affiliation in terms of engaging the regional politics, and it may promote Turkish position in the region. On the other hand, investment, and this is the most frequented issue in Turkish media today,
yes,
because UAE has already engaged to Turkish economy like a potential of $9 billion, and
yes,
additional $10 billion is expected. So, well, it's economy.
We're going to get into that, but Cinzia, what's your take on that? I mean, how has Turkey's lately improved relations with Egypt and Saudi Arabia pushed the UAE to reach out to Turkey? What's at stake for Abu Dhabi here?
Absolutely. So to a certain extent, as I mentioned before, this trend was already ongoing with or without the UAE. And so the risk for Abu Dhabi was to be cut out to some extent of this de-escalation that was already going on. And that's definitely not what the UAE wants. The UAE has been slowly but surely cutting out a significant regional role for itself. It is a political player well beyond its borders. It is an economic player, and it's been also a security player, although sometimes, via proxy forces and not directly. And then this sort of primary regional position is something that is very dear to the ambitions of the Emirati leadership. And that includes being, on top of changing trends and developments. And the UAE can do that because they are a small state that has always had this flexibility and, to a certain extent, pragmatism in their regional relations. So they can adapt relatively easily to new trends. And that is what they want to do. They want to stay on top of the regional conversation, and they want to remain an important partner for Egypt and Saudi Arabia, while they also consider the opportunities for rebooting relations with Turkey.
So, Giorgio, what's your take on that? Doesn't it want to be isolated further?
Yeah, back in 2019, when Turkey launched its operations against the YPG group in Syria, there was an Emirati effort to unite Arab countries against Ankara's foreign policy in the Arab world. And I think the UAE had a lot of shortcomings when it came to that quest. I think the UAE certainly noticed some other Arab states, as you mentioned, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, trying to move past problems with Turkey. And I think Abu Dhabi probably saw that any effort to unite the Arab world against Turkey would not necessarily be realistic. And I think very pragmatically, Abu Dhabi has made some adjustments.
So do you I mean, is it that easy for the UAE to back down from its ambitious foreign policy, let's say in Libya, in Yemen, in Syria, in Eastern Mediterranean?
It's not easy to do so, but I think the Emiratis have realized that there are some serious costs that they would have had to have paid to continue with that foreign policy, with Libya being a case in point. When you look at the counteroffensive against Haftar's LNA in late 2019 and in 2020, the UAE saw itself as having much to lose if it were to keep on pushing Haftar toward trying to achieve some sort of a military outcome. So the UAE has very much seen it as being in its own interest to pursue a more diplomatic approach to these regional files.
So Murat, is it easy to leave behind those differences and works towards a cooperation on various sectors?
I think there are two factors to be concerned in this. The first one is trust, because Turkey and our Emirates does have a history of not trust, but cautious approach against each other. And the second one is a psychological U-turn. That means, well, they are really committed to perceive each other as competing actors, but there must be a line that they surpass this feeling and establish a new mood. I think tomorrow's meeting will be just judging each other in terms of their intention. And as far as they ensure their stance and the others, they may develop it. I mean, it's just a start, not the end.
So, Cinzia, what's your take on that? Could they engage economically while they confront each other politically and ideologically? I don't know the United Arab Emirates side, but Turkey's position on Syria as well as the Eastern Mediterranean, I think will remain the same. So what's your take on that? How is that cooperation going to work out?
I think, there is something that we should clear out. This is not a sign of neither actor probably lowering their ambitions in terms of, retaining a key position throughout the region. And it's simply, there's also recognition, as you were mentioning, that there are diverging starting points and diverging interests that will not be necessarily reconciled on all theaters. I think there's just a recognition that the competition has to shift from hard power to soft power, and that there is going to be a space for compromises that is opened also thanks to a new engagement that is economic, that is social, and that is also political. So I think, we're sort of exiting a period of where there was only a zero-sum game mentality in the region towards a period where, yes, there are diverging interests and end games, and sometimes it's not going to be possible to reconcile them, but there are other places, other theaters, other files and dossiers where you can find a compromise position.
Yes.
So that's, I think, what we're witnessing.
So, Giorgio, what's your take on that? Do you agree with Cinzia? And could these economic openings provide a first step towards resolving their political disputes in the future? I mean, how do you see relations moving forward?
Yeah, that's right. I definitely do agree. I think obviously these economic opportunities provide opportunities to lower temperatures in the relationship. But one thing I do want to point out, though, is that there's a lot of geopolitical instability in the region, so much uncertainty. If something similar to the events of 2011, when you had so many protests and revolutions taking place throughout the Arab world, if something like that were to happen again, it could certainly jolt everything and cause the differences between Ankara and Abu Dhabi to again become more relevant. So I think this is great how the two countries are taking these big steps to decrease the tensions. But again, I think we should not be naive, and we should definitely keep in mind that events can take place in the region that raise those tensions again down the road.
So, Murat, last question. What's your take on that? How do you think the relations will evolve?
Well, first, they will just try to understand each other tomorrow. And Turkish expectation is not to have an Emirates with hidden agendas and challenging directly Turkey in the region. On the other hand, the same applies for the Emirates. That means there must be a mechanism between two countries that they can communicate easily. So the first phase of interaction could be, building up a type of mechanism that both sides can consult with each other with fixed mechanism. So this is what I expect in the coming meeting.
All right, Cinzia, Giorgio, and Murat, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Aisha Subarkash. Next time, we look at how Turkey could help Qatar provide security at next year's FIFA World Cup. Plus, could facial recognition technology be misused by police? Until then, if you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.